According to the law, it's legal. I'm just making bump firing safer. It's not that difficult, it's just physics. That's what shocks me about all this. Is like, guys, people have been doing this for decades.
Yeah.
This is cool. I grew up in a town of 250 people. The only way you can escape that world is like the military. I had no idea what to expect. I wasn't even trying to start a company. I was just hoping that I could at least sell 500 of them and I didn't fail my family. The VA is the biggest pusher of drugs in the world. The amount of opioids that I was given is horrible. They were giving me 240 Percocet a month and 120 methadone a month with no plan of ever getting off of them. That one hurt. It felt like a big betrayal. Then Vegas happened.
In a matter of seconds, a country music festival turned tragic, a storm of gunfire raining down upon an innocent crowd.
Active shooter. We have an active shooter inside the fairgrounds.
I didn't know to get up, to run, to stay, to just, it was just shooting randomly.
Nobody can prepare anybody for something like that.
As for banning bump stocks, Mr. Trump said today that he is going to write up an executive order shortly to do it himself. No legislation required.
I signed a memorandum directing the Attorney General to propose regulations to ban all devices that turn legal weapons into machine guns.
When the president starts tweeting about something that you invented, you go from being unknown to known real quick, and the world just come crushing down. I was being hunted. I didn't sleep in my own home for 3 months.
Before we get started, I'm just so grateful just to be here.
I am too, brother.
Thanks for setting aside the time.
Absolutely.
Sometimes I think people don't know what they haven't heard because they're just hearing too much of some other side of the story. And so I think what you had to say is important for people to have access to more than anything, whether they choose to listen to it or not. I think it's important for it to be documented, and just as much for you as anyone else in the country, just to be able to be like, you know what, like, I want to hear the other side of this. I want to hear what reality is, because I know what I've heard about the person, but you know,
Nobody's
have we heard have we heard from the creator? Have we heard that side of it? Have we heard, you know, how this happened and what that did to this American and this American's family? And
well, and that was the big lie that they told everybody. It was, they made the world believe that they were attacking an industry.
Right.
And so they were like, this is an evil industry, we're gonna shut it down. And they lied to everybody. They were just coming after me. Like,
before we get into that, because I want to kind of start at the beginning, tell me about childhood, tell me about how you were raised.
Okay, so like, I was raised by my grandparents. My parents, for lack of a better word, abandoned me when I was a year old. So fortunately, my grandparents raised me. It was out in West Texas, Moran, Texas. It's got a population of, at that time, it was about 350 people. The local school there, pre-K through 12th, you were about 110 kids in the entire school. So my class was, like, I graduated in a class of 3. We grew up, it was one of those things where I was very fortunate that we grew up very poor, but I didn't know it. But it was one of those things where we didn't have central heat and cooling. Like, we lived out in the middle of nowhere, West Texas. We were on about 1,000 acres of land, so I was able to go hunting and fishing whenever I wanted to. And so that was a huge part of my growing up, is I would literally go to school in the morning, and then I would come back, and after watching either like He-Man or Transformers or G.I. Joe or something like that, I'd either grab my fishing pole or my rifle and go hunting and fishing till dark. Or I'd go help my granddad on the farm. And as I got older, that's, you know, in double digits, like, I became a useful hand to my grandfather. And I credit a lot of my ingenuity, my craftiness, whatever you want to call it, to the lessons that he taught me. He was a World War II vet. He served in the Pacific. One of the most amazing men I've ever met in my life. In the 40 years I knew him, I never heard him say one negative thing about my grandmother.
Really?
Not even, I don't like her hair color, or I don't like her hair. Nothing negative at all in 40 years. Get to about my age, realize how impressive
Yeah.
that is. Talk about a man of character. So to be able to do that, you have to be. And just genuinely one of the greatest men I've ever met, if not the greatest.
How was he raising you?
So we
growing
are
up?
so remote in West Texas that the closest Walmart's 45 miles away.
Right.
And so especially now living in East Tennessee, most people can't even fathom that. So to go get groceries, you're going to drive about 100 miles at least. And
Set aside a couple hours.
right, so when you live on a farm, you can't just go to town and get things that you need to fix broken tractors and stuff like that, because you can't afford to waste a whole day because a storm may be coming in. You got to get the tractor running. And what he taught me was that sometimes there's things that you need that don't exist, and you must create them. The tractor may be so old that they don't make those types of manifolds anymore, so you literally have to make one. And just that type of be creative and create something better that won't break.
Right.
He did that as well and taught me how to do it. So I really credit him with instilling that in me, and also allowing me to do dangerous things safely. Like, I was running a cut and torch and welder and building things at the age of 12. But
Wow.
he allowed me to do that. He allowed me the freedom of, hey, you may cut your hand. You'll probably burn yourself with the cut and torch. Like, just try to do it as safely as possible. And like, he never killed my creativity. I was really fortunate that my grandparents raised me, and they were wonderful people. My grandmother was an amazing woman. Like, they broke the mold whenever they made those people. Like, I wish there were more people like that. And I was very fortunate that they were still around whenever I got done with my military part of my life, and that they actually got to have a meaningful relationship with my children, which is their great-grandchildren. Like, how many people
Huge.
get the opportunity to
Not
know who
many.
their great-grandparents are and like build a relationship with them? So there's blessings there. As I've gotten older, I can see those lessons now, but I didn't recognize them then. So, I mean, that's one of the reasons why I think that older men make better parents. I think that for me, as I've gotten older, I've become a better dad. And that's and those lessons that my grandfather taught me are easier to see.
Yeah. Tell me about your high school and leading up to your decision to go into the military. What's going on in your life?
That was right around 1990, 1991. There's not a whole lot of things to do out in West Texas except play the sports that the school offers. Football, basketball, and track. That's it. And so it's such a small school. We played six-man football. Are you familiar with what six-man are? So instead of a 100-yard field, you have an 80-yard field. Instead of 50 yards wide, it's 40 yards wide.
Okay.
And then you have six people on each side. And it's not uncommon to have games that are 80 to 50, 130 points scored in the game. And but it's because these small schools can't field a full 11-man team. So we would have 6 men on the field, and we were lucky if we had 2 guys on the sideline. So you better hope that there's no injuries that night. I was never really that good at sports. I was good enough to start, but I was never the star athlete.
Okay.
So it's one of those things where it's like, hey, we need one more guy. Pick Jeremiah. And so I handled my business, but I was never I was always good with math and figuring out things.
That aspect, did you enjoy school, or were you just kind of doing it?
It came easy for me, the academic part. I didn't mind it. I've considered it a waste of my time because I could teach myself faster than the teachers could. So that's one of the reasons why I went into the military after I graduated from high school. I went for, like I said, a year to the community college. I made the dean's list, and I was like, this is boring. Like, I don't want to do this for another 3, 4, 5, however many years it takes, and I really don't even know what I want to do. And I was like, but you know what I want to do? I want to get out of here and go see the world. So I went down to the recruiter and I was like, hey, I want to fly. And he's like, well, we don't have any flying positions. I'm like, well, call me when you do. And he called me like 3 months later and he's like, we've got a couple of positions that are coming down that are flying slots. And he's like, you want one? And this was like mid-March, I believe it was, in 96. And he called and said, we got your spot. And I was like, when can I go? Like, I'll drop out and go tomorrow. And he's like, no, you go ahead and finish that first year because you'll get an extra rank. You'll be an E2 instead of an E1, which at the time was the difference between like $80 a month, which was a lot of money to me back then.
Good. Yeah.
And so he's like, good, I've already signed you up. I was just calling to let you know. And so like that May, I shipped off into the military. So
what was it like being away for the first time?
it wasn't that bad. I wanted the adventure.
You were
Like
there,
I was already
very
decided.
present.
Yes, I'd already decided that I'm ready to go adventure this world. So, like, I didn't miss anything. There was no longing to go back. I was going to go forward and see what was out there.
What was that slot that you got? That
I was a load master on C-130s.
okay.
So that's the guy in the back that managed the back of the airplane. We like to joke that the pilots just take us to go where we need to do the work. So it's the big old plane with the 4 props,
Yep.
and we drop jumpers in places that most planes can't get to. So cool side skit on that story is I remember in 4th grade, like they took us to Dulles Air Force Base to do a tour, and I remember that loadmasters, we got to go to the flight line, and I remember they
Really?
took us out on the 130s, and I remember
that's
as
cool.
I guess that 4th grade, what would I be, like 8, 9 years old, something like that. I remember sitting in that plane and going, oh my goodness, this thing's humongous. And then it's a weird world we live in.
Yeah.
A decade later, I'm on one of those airplanes. Like, it probably was the same one because I flew on a 63 model. I was like, this airplane's,
wow.
I'm like, this airplane's like 15 years older than me, and I'm old. So makes you wonder sometimes, I hope they changed the brakes recently. But that's kind of how it all got started. Like, it was a great time, great airplane, great community. I mean, the things I got to see and do. I was stationed in Europe, so that was one of the funny things. Is at first I was supposed to be stationed. It was the 51st Airlift Squadron in Moody Air Force Base. I believe they were called the Fighting Kangaroos. And I was training for a flight position. Takes close to a year to get through all the training and stuff like that, because you have to go through SEER training, you have to go through basic air crew school, you have to go through the specific air crew school. So it just takes a while. And while I was going through that pipeline, the 51st shut down. So that was the first time I ever got a choice in the military. Like, the guy that does the slot assignments called me up and he was like, where do you want to go? And I was, this is 6 months into the military, 7 months in the military. I'm like, I get a choice? Like, what? Since when do I get a choice?
Yeah.
And he was like, you can't do Japan and you can't do Anchorage. He goes, you can do it anywhere else. And there's not a lot of 130 bases in this world. So I knew about Ramstein. I knew about Germany. So I asked. And he was like, yep, they've got a slot open. And out of, I think there was 14 guys on, and about 14 guys and about 4 girls doing the Loadmaster course that time. I was the only guy that got an overseas assignment. Everybody else was staying stateside, and their assignments, like Dulles Air Force Base, is about 45 minutes from where I grew up.
So walk me through exiting your military career and how you kind of generated this idea and reconnecting with your grandparents. Tell me how that.
So in 2004, I suffered an injury while in the military overseas, and it resulted in a couple of brain surgeries that left me in really bad shape. Like I was talking earlier, I couldn't even make coffee for about 2 or 3 months. The process of, taking the pot out, filling it up with water, pouring it in, putting a filter in, putting coffee grounds in, putting the pot back, that's an important one, and turning it on. My brain wouldn't do it. it was challenging. It was real challenging. But fortunately, like, the brain is a very amazing, whatever it's called. Like, it's, because it heals itself. Like, I've fortunately gotten back a significant amount of the things that I lost. There's still things there, but I've also learned to live with those. Here's the flip side of it, and you know, it's a real personal side of it. The VA is the biggest pusher of drugs in the world. The amount of opioids that I was given over those 9 years is horrible. They were giving me 240 Percocet a month and 120 methadone a month with no plan of ever getting off of them. I credit starting my business to saving my life. Because in 2013, I had to go get off all that stuff. And the VA was upset that I did it. That's the last time I actually went to the VA. So that's a real personal side of it. I tell it because it's important. I've met a lot of people since then that have fought with the same thing. That stuff is the devil. Like, once it gets hooked into your soul, it's rough. But, you know, that's why I don't go to the doctor anymore. That's why I don't, like, when I do go into for a physical, and they're like, do you take anything? I'm like, Advil and whiskey. Like, they're like, what do you do if the pain hurts? Drink more. But those pills, they'll steal your soul. Okay, so where were we? We got to get off that one.
Yeah.
Like, that one will crush me. That one hurt. It felt like a big betrayal. So.
Yeah, I can only imagine what that feels like, to be trapped and to know you need to get away, and to be looking to who's gonna.
No one's coming to save you.
Who's gonna help you in that, and no one's there.
No one's coming to save you. You have to be strong. You have to make hard decisions, and you have to suffer. It wasn't easy and it hurt, but you can't live that way either. I mean, that was the determining factor. It was the point where it's like, hey, this has to stop. And it breaks my heart for them, for my brothers and sisters that choose the other way.
Yeah.
But I understand. Like, it is devastating. Like, they put me on these back in 2004. Like, it's 2009. So I've been on these things for 5 years at that point. Like, you know, these things were supposed to be like, hey, you just had your head cut open and part of your skull removed. Here's you something to take the edge off. But with no plan of ever getting off.
Yeah.
And, you know, especially me at that age, I think I was 27. You really want to believe that everyone has your best interests at heart. You really do.
Oh, I get it.
And so you want to believe that that doctor's telling you what's best for you.
Yeah.
And, you know, unfortunately, we just saw that on a national level, that it's not everybody cares.
Yeah.
So I had to learn that lesson the hard way.
That's a hard lesson.
Yes, it is.
I get it.
It's a very hard lesson. But that happened all in 2004, and of course the military needs fresh bodies. They don't have time to wait for people to heal. So they put me on a temporary retirement. And so for the next 5 years, I decided to go back to my original family home, which is my grandparents' ranch. And I spent it was probably the next 2 years building a metal barn and turning it into just a home so I would have a place to live. For those first 2 years, I actually had to live with my grandparents. While I was actually homeless. Like, the VA, I had been retired, and this was the tragedy that hit so many families in the early part of Operation Enduring Freedom and Operation Iraqi Freedom. When the first bunch of people came back hurt, the VA wasn't ready for it. So the military had retired me, but I don't get a military retirement because I'm entitled to VA benefits. You get one or the other.
Right.
So since I was entitled to VA benefits, I was not getting a retirement, and I was having to wait on the VA. And it took them right at 2 years to process my claim. So for 2 years, like, I was living with my it was bad. It was rough. Like, it was real rough. Like, we lost the home that we had bought while I was in the military. We had to sell one of our vehicles. Like, we had to move in with my grandparents.
Were they both still working?
Yes. My grandparents really never stopped working.
I believe it.
And I mean, we were on food stamps.
Yeah.
Like, it was that hard. And even after, you know, the VA came in and approved my benefits and worked all of that out. And here's the thing is, the sad thing is I'm not the only story. Like, during that time period, like, there were tons of vets that were coming back their families were just getting decimated because the VA's process was so slow. They've done a lot of things to fix that since then, but at that time it was woefully inadequate, and, you know, they've addressed most of them. So I don't want to just sit here and beat up on the VA. I just want to tell it how it was.
But share that part.
Yeah. So I'm building my home, and we never really got it all the way finished. We got it livable. Like, we didn't have, you know, it was just sheetrock on the walls. There were some places there were just cardboard stapled to the 2x4s, and so, well, the kids could draw on it. I was like, I don't care. I just need a home. And you know, I spent the next 2 to 3 years just focusing on getting better. I still can't drive a car. Like, the process.
Takes a while for that. I do know.
Yeah, it just took a long time, and I started messing around with hunting. Like, I hunted and fished my whole entire life. So now that I'm back at the ranch, I was like,
let's go back to what I know. Yeah.
Right, exactly. You know, let's do something that comes naturally.
Yeah.
And I started coyote hunting again, and that's where you just predator call in, and you get rid of the predators that are hurting your cows and stuff like that.
Sure. Just
trying to be useful and find something that I could enjoy, or you'll just be bored all the time.
Yeah.
And so I started messing around. I had seen a video of someone bump firing, and I was like, holy cow, that's cool. Because there's no social media at this point. YouTube was just like a video dump site.
No one even really knows it's going anywhere.
So I was like, that's cool. And I'd been hanging out with one of my buddies in West Texas, and we'd been shooting coyotes together and stuff like that. And I was like, the next time we went out target practicing, because in West Texas, we still go out and shoot guns just for fun. Like, we'll go out and go target practicing for fun. There's lots of people in this world that go shooting just for fun. There's people that jump out of airplanes for fun. I'm like, so I don't know why that. There's a lot of people that can't grasp that nowadays. They're like, you shoot guns for fun? And I'm like, yeah. I mean, but like I said, that was one of the things that people are taken aback by now. But anyway, back to my buddy coming out. So he comes out, and I'm like, I'm going to show him. And I was like, we go over here. There was some so we call ponds in Texas tanks, stock tanks, and we're not as blessed like they are here in East Tennessee. Water doesn't come often, so we dig holes in the ground and hope they fill up.
You get them.
So they're just giant mud holes, really. But you have this big embankment on the back, and it makes a great backstop for shooting into.
Super safe.
Yeah, so I just hollered at my buddy. I was like, hey, come check this out. And we were like, he shot a couple times. I was like, show me how fast you can shoot. And he was like, da-da-da-da. And I don't know, I'm thinking I'm like 30 at this time.
Okay.
Like, I'm still a young man.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, watch this. And I was like, and we were both like, because I'd only done it a couple times. His jaw.
But you had figured it out pretty easily?
Oh, super easily. Yeah. I mean, it's just like tying a tie on YouTube. Like, you watch it a couple times, it's not that difficult. It's just physics. Like, that's what shocks me about all this. Is like, guys, it's physics. People have been doing this for decades. This is cool. But the bad thing is, right after I get done shooting that magazine, I hear moo, and I was like, oh, no. I hope I didn't send one over the backstop and hit Pop's cow. I'm like, otherwise I guess I'm going to the butcher, so we got hamburger meat.
Yep.
But thankfully I didn't hit a cow. But that's when there's one of those things where I was like,
I need to be more control with this.
Well, it was like, if you can do that, there's got to be a way that you can hold it safely and do the same thing.
Yeah. Were you doing it at your hip to do that?
I just put my fingers through the belt loop. But shooting from the hips extremely dangerous.
It's just you
You're
don't have the control.
No,
Yeah.
and you don't have a sight picture. You're holding the gun all
Yeah.
flimsy.
Yeah.
You could accidentally shoot yourself.
Yeah.
Like, it's not safe
It's not
to
great.
shoot. Yeah, it's not a safe practice.
Yeah.
But it's fun. Jumping out of an airplane's not
Sure.
safe either.
Sure.
But it's fun.
But you have parachutes that are designed.
Well,
You've got
you do
procedures
dangerous things as safely as possible. That's what my granddad taught
That's
me.
right.
So whenever that cow mooed, I was like, that's when it sort of started the gears. And so for a couple of months, I had a couple of different ideas. I'd come up with like a sling that you could wrap around your shoulder that could help you brace things, and a couple of other different ideas. But none of them were like repeatable, and they weren't reliable. They weren't easy to do, and they were just hokey. I wasn't even trying to start a company at this point. I was just trying to figure out how to make
Right.
something I could use.
Right.
I was like, I don't feel comfortable using this, because like I said, this was before I even knew what business was. I'm just a dirt farmer from West Texas trying to make me something that's fun so that I can go shoot fast and legally. Ultimately, that's what it came down to. Is I went and read the law, and I'm like, what am I allowed to do? And through all of these transitions, I came up with the bump stock. And you've seen the wooden one with just a piece of 2x10 duct tape and PVC pipe.
PVC pipe, yeah.
And it works great. And I was like, this is really, really cool. And so I had made something that I enjoyed. And then that's the thing, is once you've done that, you're like, what do I do with it? Like, this is awesome. So I had a couple of my buddies come over, and they shot it, and they thought it was awesome. And then I made the next model, which was, I just took the leg off of my trampoline, because it's the right diameter to go over the buffer tube. Then I took my Dremel and cut out a channel so that it would actually fit over it. And I took some square tube and took my welder that I'd learned to use when I was 12 because of my granddad, and mocked up a metal one that worked really well too. And it actually,
and a little bit prettier.
Yeah, a little bit. So it's just a step and a step. I'm like, okay, that actually looks like, it doesn't look like an oar anymore. Like when you put the wooden one on, the gun looks like an oar. Like you'd be like going down the river. And I'm like, okay, this one actually looks like it kind of belongs there.
Yeah.
But it was one of those things where I'm like, what do I do with this?
Yeah.
Like, it's cool. I like it. According to the law, it's legal because there's no automatic functions, there's no mechanical functions or anything.
Yeah.
I'm just making bump firing safer.
Yeah.
I moved the exact same physical actions that are done from your hip that has been
front end,
said legal for, half a century at least that I know of, since the 70s. I mean, that's as far back as I could trace it. And made it to where you could safely hold the gun now and do the same thing. So I keep bringing this into development, and it probably took 4 or 5 months to like get it to the point where it kind of looked like it does today.
Yeah.
It looked like something that you could actually belongs on a gun. And then I took that model and sent it to the ATF, and I think that was January of 2010. And I waited and I waited and I waited, and I got it back in June of 2010, and they were like, doesn't do anything automatically. It allows you to bump fire safely, basically. There are letters on the internet, they can read it, but the key point was it's not a machine gun. And I wanted to do everything legally. And so when I got that letter back, then I actually went and got my patent, and I might have filed for a provisional by then, I'm not sure. But that's whenever I really started pressing forward, because I thought it was legal, so I sent it to the government. The government said it was legal, so I'm clear to go.
Yeah.
Now I'm like, now what do I do? Like, how do I build a business?
Right.
And so it's amazing how people just get put in your life at the right time in the right place. And though I ended up finding my patent attorney, he's from Michigan, amazing patent attorney, John Shackelford. He still works with me now. And there's numerous other people that just showed up. And it helped me create that business, which, took months and months and months just to get started. So I get the stock back from the ATF in June, and now it's like, you're cleared hot. Well, to build an actual mold to cast parts costs tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars. And I'm broke. Like, I'm living on food stamps. And so I had a little bit of money saved up from the back pay they gave me for those years they made me wait.
Mm-hmm.
And I used that to get me started, basically. And I also had a friend that was involved in the beginning that helped me get started.
Right.
And, you know, my goal, like I'd said earlier, was whenever I started, I was like, I can only afford to make 500 units. Like, that's all I can afford to make. I'm beyond tapped out. Like, I'm borrowing money to do this at that point. And I was like, you know, if I can sell 500 units in the first year, like, I'll make my money back, and I'll make about $10,000 or $15,000, which is half of what I get in a year. So I'm like, that's a huge win.
Yeah.
Like, that's a blessing, an absolute blessing. And on December 15th of 2010, I put the first video up. And I think I linked it on one of the popular websites at the time, because you didn't have apps and social media, so it was blogs. And, you know, I had been an avid writer in one of the online sites and over the years, because I enjoy hunting and guns and stuff like that.
Right.
And I had mentioned it on there, and then they immediately blocked me because they said I was advertising, and they wanted me to pay advertising fees. And I was like,
Of course.
I'm a dirt farmer from West Texas. Like,
Yeah.
I literally just started my business. What is this advertising thing? Like, I have to pay money to talk about my product on your site?
That's
I'm like,
right.
I know nothing.
That's right.
You know, all of this was brand new to me. So I had no experience, and unfortunately, I didn't have anybody to call. I didn't know anybody. So after I got the approval from the ATF, I got the mold built, and then the company launched on December 15th, 2010. That was before your main social media like Facebook. I think
Yeah.
Facebook was on college campuses or something like that, but any real type of individual could only advertise through like YouTube or get their information out there through YouTube. So I uploaded, it was probably a minute-long video that took me like 3 days to make, because I had to learn how to video edit. And then that was also back before cell phone cameras, so it's like I'm walking around with this handy cam. So I'm like, I had to learn every single part of the business. I had to build the website. I had to set up the payment processors. I had to learn the manufacturing. I had to learn distribution channels. It was a hard learn on the dealer network, but I dropped that video on YouTube, and the reaction was just insane. Like, it was unbelievable. And, you know, a couple trickled in, and then in the first 4 days, I had sold my initial run of 500. And like, at that point, you know, everybody, well, I won't say everybody, but, you know, you try to make a plan for most things. And like I had said earlier, is, you know, my plan was to spend this whole year selling those first 500. So my grandfather would drive me around, and this was prior to prior to December 15th, launching it live to the nation.
Okay.
So what ends up happening when you're in manufacturing is you get test samples after you have a mold built. And so I've got an original of like 12 test samples, and they send them to you and make sure that the tooling is built properly. And so, because I knew that I had to sell these things as fast as possible, because I spent every dime I had to do this, like, I took those test samples and I was showing like rod and gun clubs and stuff like that down in Texas. And my granddad would take me to those places. Like, somebody would be like, hey, I'm going to have 5 or 10 of my friends come out. And I remember we were on the way, and I was like, man, Pop, it'd be nice if I could sell these 500. He looked over him and he's like, you got to sell 250 first. And I'm like, he's not wrong. So it was one of those things where I'm like, even Pop was, you know, was planning for something like that, like for it to take a while. For, you know, most businesses don't have that type of success, that when you open up, that the public just embraces you like we did. And so we sold those first 500 units in the first 4 days. And past that, it was literally wad up my plan, throw it in the trash, and hold on. So, because it just went crazy after that. And learning how to I didn't have a dealer network. I didn't think dealers would be interested in my product, nor did I even
Wow.
know what a dealer network was. Like, I
Right.
knew nothing. And so I started having dealers contact me. They're like, well, what's our dealer price? And I'm like, what's that mean? So, like, I had to learn all of that starting up, and I got to meet some really good small business owners all across America. One of the greatest things was, like, there was a lot of small town gun shops and large gun shops that I got to know the individuals on a personal level who they were just normal people that had a passion for it, that opened up a gun shop and had been going by. Like, my product, they carried my product, which allowed me to build my business, and they showed support for my idea. Like, when somebody gets behind you and goes, I appreciate what you did, you made something that's neat,
Yeah.
that means something to an
Yeah.
inventor. Like, that's the ultimate thank you, is like, I like what you made.
Yeah.
And these guys, what's so wonderful about it is, like, by them selling my product, like, one of the guys was, I got to send my daughter to college through the profits that your product provided. One guy's like, I got to buy out my business partner and I own my business
Wow.
now because of the profits from your product alone. And
Wow.
so, like, they called me and told me these things, and that's such a wonderful blessing to hear, because you're like, what I created is doing good things
Yeah.
and making people happy. And ultimately, that's what I created the bump stock for, was to go have fun with. And ultimately, it did other great things. People had lots of fun.
Yeah.
There's the stories of people going out and taking their dad shooting for the first time in 20 years. And they're like, my dad smiled like I've never seen him smile in 20 years. And just a lot of really cool stories. So those started
bet.
rolling then. And running a small business that grows that quickly, you always have challenges. Like, you have personnel challenges, you have logistical challenges, you have people that like you, you have
Yeah.
people that don't like you. And you just have to learn to navigate through that. And every day you wake up, there's a different problem to deal with. And I know most small business owners know that.
Yeah.
I mean, because they go through it every day too. It's like, hey, what's the challenge for today?
Yeah.
And I just had to learn all those things very, very quickly.
Yeah. What were some of the highlighted moments, positive and negative, in those first years?
In the first couple of years, it's just building a good team is hard. Like, it's very difficult, especially when you don't have your house in order. You know, I'm on painkillers. I'm on opioids. Like, I'm drugged out of my mind. That presented its own challenge in and of itself. As I remember, there would be days that I would get up and I would feel great, and I'm excited because we're doing wonderful things at the company, and I would unknowingly forget to take my medication. And then I would go over there and I would be like talking to everybody, working through, the engineering and specs and like that. And then they'd be like, you don't look good. I'll be like, I'm sweating. And then I'd get sick, start throwing up. And that's when it really occurred to me. I'm like, I don't want to live like this. Like, I woke up feeling great. Like, so that was the real eye opener for me. I mean, that was one of the struggles for sure. And one of the blessings. Like, how many people don't ever recognize that? Like, so I feel very blessed that through all of that, I realized that and made a decision not to live that way. As far as the blessings go, the greatest blessing is I got to do this with my grandparents.
Yeah.
The first couple of years I got to do it with my granddad before he passed. Him and my grandmother were the first two employees. Every single bump stock that came out of Slide Fire during those first few years were hand checked by my granddad. Every single one. Because people would be like, what's your quality control? I'm like, we check every one. And they're like,
What does that mean?
every single one?
Yeah,
And I'm
yeah.
like, yeah, my granddad literally puts one on an 80% lower to check dimensions and check movement and make sure everything is good. And if he doesn't like it, he QCs it out. And like, we had boxes and pallets of, he was like, I don't like that. But we had, our return rate was like 1.5%. Like, it was, even the credit card processing companies were like, people don't send your stuff back. And I'm like, it's fine. Like, they like it. And so, and I also, like I said, we didn't send broken parts.
Yeah.
Like, we took care of our customers. At least we tried our very, very best.
Right.
And that was actually one of the nice things.
What an exciting time.
Yeah, like we had customers that would come up to us and be like, I love your product, I love your people, y'all done great. I called up, y'all took care of us. Like, the people were awesome. Like, they really are. Like, there's still a lot of really good people out there. Going to the gun shows, because nobody knew who I was. Like, and I would go to gun shows, and I don't tell people that I'm the owner. Like, there's not any interviews of me during those time periods. There's a couple of like videos of me showing the product, but I didn't sit down and talk to people. But going to the gun shows as one of the guys and getting to educate people about the product is just one of the guys or one of the gals.
Sure.
People would say wonderful things about the product, not knowing. So that was really cool.
It's a nice, gratifying.
It was really cool. It was really, really cool to hear that those people loved it that much. It really was. And that's a massive blessing. I think that's a testament on how things got done and handled, and I think that that's...
how you built the company.
And the environment.
The culture.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, the culture was just wonderful. Like, it was... here's the funny thing about, like, my company. My grandparents... The average age in my company was like 68.
Wow, okay.
I mean, we had like 40 people working.
Okay.
But what ended up happening is, like, the dairy farmer down the road, he's 75. He showed up, and I've known him my whole life. He literally lives 3 miles down the road.
You built this in Moran?
Yes.
Yeah.
And so is Tommy Brooks. He's passed. He's a great man. And he just showed up, and he's like, well, I closed the dairy down a couple of years ago, kind of bored. Like, you mind if I just hang out and, like, help Julie and Buster? Because they would play dominoes and cards, canasta, like once every 3 or 4 months. And they just wanted to hang out. I was like, okay, yeah, this is what I can pay you. And he's like, I don't care. I just want to hang out.
Yeah.
And I had it like, and then so, like, my ag teacher, when he retired from teaching, and I think it was 2012, he came out there and worked. A couple of the people I went through kindergarten through high school with.
These are some...
And then, I had some of my military buddies as well. But it was just...
Yeah.
It's a bizarre when you
really
do things.
Brought a lot of people together to make that work.
And then, like I said, I've known these people for decades.
Right.
So, and then I got to bring in a lot of really neat people from outside of that. Like my engineers from Pittsburgh and Ohio and stuff like that came in Michigan that came to be part of the team remotely and moving down to be part of the team. Like, their skill sets are amazing. Like, they are really, really talented people. And you just don't meet those quality of people in West Texas that know those skill sets. West Texas has different skill sets. Yeah. And so that was really, from a learning standpoint, a real blessing and a really awesome opportunity to get to study under these guys, because they're exceptional engineers. And I have a hunger to learn. So they taught me a whole bunch of really cool stuff.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So now kind of lead me into
the later years.
Lead me into the later years. What's going on? How that's affecting your company?
Let's see. Good place to start. Granny passes in 2016. I believe it was April. And at that point, like, it took a lot of wind out of the sails, because my grandparents meant the world to me. In 2014, when Pop passed, the last lucid conversation I had with him, he began to weep. And this was a tough man. And he said he wasn't ready to die yet. And that scared me. Yeah. That terrified me. That this great man that's done such amazing things, that lived an amazing life, was not ready to go. And that meant he had things that was left undone. Yeah. There must have been things that he wanted to do or places to see, something. And that scared me. So I made a plan. It took me a little bit of time, and when Granny passed is when I made the plan. I was like, I have to get done with this. There's a world out there that I want to see. There's adventures to be had. And I don't want to be stuck here doing this forever. So that was in 2016 when Granny passed. I was very blessed and very fortunate, but that conversation with my grandfather changed perspectives on many things for me. And so I devised a plan. I need to get to this number to get done. And so I started working. I started working to get there. And, you know, this is, I don't know if I've ever told this story. I know I haven't told it on film. In 2017, I had Slide Fire up for sale because I had gotten about a third of the way to that number.
To that goal.
To that goal.
To be able to.
And I was like, if I can get rid of this, like, it'll get me the rest of the way.
Wow.
And so it was around March time period in 2017 that I'm talking with these individuals, and we had come up with a deal for it to sell. And they were doing their due diligence, and there was a disagreement, and the number changed. And for me, it wouldn't get me to that number that I needed to retire. So, but before it changed, it would have.
Right.
So I was like,
change the deal.
I'm like, no deal.
Yeah.
I'm like, I can't. Like, that number's not where I need to be. I know where I have to be. And so, and I also don't like when people change what they say. It just doesn't sit, like, do what you say you're going to do. And so I decided to walk away from that deal. And that was probably August of 2017. And so I was just going to strap in. I had you know, I'm a numbers guy. Like, I'm been blessed that numbers make sense to me. And I had already plotted everything out. I was like, 2022, I'll be able to retire. Like, I'll hit that number based on this charting in 2022. And so I just strapped in and started working. Like, continue to do what I'd done for the last 7 years. Just keep working. We'll get there, one step at a time. And then Vegas happened. And that was an extremely difficult time. Nobody can prepare anybody for something like that. On so many different levels, on a personal level, on a company level, just when something that tragic happens and then they pull you into it. And I've got lots of opinions on that. And, you know, I'm just gonna keep it to how my company was affected and try to, but we literally went from not being really known, like, we had done well as a company over the previous 7 years, and was very blessed and fortunate to have been what I thought was extremely successful. But when the news starts, when the president starts tweeting about something that you invented, starts talking about your company, people notice. You go from being unknown to known real quick.
Real quick.
And, you know, our website got destroyed by hackers. Like, I mean, everything. Like, the world turned its attention on me. Because the world's saying it's an industry, and we're going to shut down this evil industry. Hey, it's just me and my grandparents, man. Like, you're... It's me and my grandparents and my bunch of my vet buddies. And the world just come crushing down. Like, people were flying out there trying to sneak onto the property. Like, I had, like I said, I'm a very private person.
Right.
So when the home team from the school would have their football games on Friday nights, I would go to the Friday night football game because there's about 100 people there. And it's my hometown. I played there. And it was something I could do on Friday night that was quiet and peaceful. And it was just my place. Like, I had reporters showing up at the football games trying to find me. Like, I was being hunted. I didn't sleep in my own home for 3 months. Now, leading up to Vegas, like, when Vegas hit, it was, like I said, it turned our worlds upside down. Everybody had different, it was not an easy time for anyone.
Yeah.
There's still not a lot of information about what happened. I've done the research. There's not much information. I think we need to look at what happened. And, you know, and what I tell people is like, hey, when I look at those pictures, there's a lot of other people in that room too. So we'll just keep it at that. But how it affected the company is we went from being relatively unknown to the whole, I had friends in Greece call me. They're like, hey, your company's on TV in Greece.
Yeah.
So, like, it was one of those things where, and when that happens, of course, like, that changes the demand for the product too.
Yeah.
And we literally did 3 years of sales in 8 hours, and I had to turn the website off because I remember sitting there talking to my shipping manager. She went to kindergarten with me all the way through high school, and like every time she would get an order, it would just hit her inbox. And I remember talking to her, and I'm glancing out of the corner of my eye, and I'm looking at her inbox, the counter beside it, and it's like ding, every 5 seconds, ding, 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 ding. We would normally ship 15 to 20 orders a day during Christmas.
Oh, wow.
Like during the summertime, especially during October, like we might only ship
Might only get
4 or 5 orders a day on a regular basis.
Yeah.
I think that day we got 13,500 orders.
Oh my gosh.
Like we were shipping around 3,000 direct to consumer annually, and we got 13,000 in roughly 8 hours.
Yeah.
So it freaked everyone out.
Yeah, I can imagine.
I was trying to push a little bit further, but my right-hand man pulled me back. He's like, hey, you got to turn the website off. And I'm like, we've never turned the website off. We've been running for 7 years and never turned the website off.
Oh, but you've never had
Yeah, there's nothing like this. Has ever
nothing
happened.
like this.
So we ended up turning the website off. We actually signed up an email list, and then we just went to work. Like we sat down and redesigned the company, and we made it to where we could actually get that through. We filled those orders in a month. You know, prior to this, to put out 20 to 30 packages a day, it took my shipping department pretty much the whole day. And we created a process to it. At one point, we were pushing out anywhere from 1,500 orders to 2,000 orders a day. Like we were literally filling Penske trucks full of orders. FedEx would come pick up that Penske truck, drop me off an empty Penske truck, and we would start filling that one. Like it got ludicrous. Like it was unbelievable, because you know, before that it was just plugging and going, and then it was a tidal wave. You know, shipping department worked great. FedEx was amazing with their response as far as the because a lot of people don't realize, but the FedEx routes are owned by individuals, and the individual that owned my route, like we worked together, and he was such a good dude to work with. And every morning I would just call him up and I'd be like, I need one truck today. I was slow yesterday, so you can probably skip a truck, just let the regular FedEx truck come by. And we got everybody their orders in 3 weeks. And then I opened the website. I built up a little bit of inventory, and then I opened the website up again, and I think we kept it on for like 4 hours before we sold all our inventory again.
Wow.
Like it would go crazy. Like we'd turn it on, inventory would sell out, and then we'd have to turn the website off. And you know, that's hindsight. I should have built a better system, but I mean, we made it work. And I think it was around Black Friday is when we were able to turn our website back on, and we were actually able, the system, we had reworked the manufacturing system, and for like to get the supply line opened up and product moving the way it should, like it takes about 6 weeks for that to happen. And so I guess it was about Black Friday that we were able to actually open up the web store and keep it open. And you know, that's when we just continued to go until, you know, the insurance company let me know, and I made the decision to shut it down because of that. And then after that, it was, you know, we tidied it up, closed everything up. The ban came through about a year later. Like I shut the company down before the ban went into effect. A lot of people get that confused. But, you know, I knew it was coming. I knew it was wrong. Even in the Supreme Court ruling that we've seen, they had as recently as April of 2017 had received a bump stock, and they had produced a letter saying that bump stocks are not machine guns. And then did an about face. I'm like, you can't do that. That's not right. You can't change the rules of the game in the middle of the game. But, you know, I've been fortunate and blessed, and I wanted to spend time with my family. Like I had achieved the goal that I had set up to do, is get done. And over the course of the last few years, I ended up moving out here to Tennessee and starting a quiet life here in the mountains of East Tennessee. I was looking for a way to step out of it. Like, that was the whole thing, was I hit that number that we talked about earlier fairly soon. And my granddad's story, like, there's more to life than paper bills.
Yeah.
And I need to go out and see those adventures. So I didn't feel forced. I wasn't upset about it, because like I said, you know, I stepped out on my own terms before the ban even. I don't even remember. I think the ban didn't even kick in for nearly a full year. I think it was March of 19.
Yeah.
So it was nearly a full year before the ban even kicked in. I knew it was wrong. I thought they made a grave mistake because it didn't follow the constitutional way of law. Like, we have a process here. Congress makes law. The executive branch is supposed to enforce it. The Supreme Court makes sure they're good laws. And that didn't happen here.
What's going on in your emotions as things kind of start to ramp up again and someone finally decides, you know what, I don't agree with this decision, and the districts start to question?
Well, that was the interesting part, because there were several cases across the United States in multiple district courts that challenged the rule. D.C. circuits, all of them. And the majority of, or all of those rulings came back that was like, no, the government can do what they want.
Right.
And I was like, okay, the chapter of slide fire is over.
Right.
Like, I can go on to build the rest of my life. And it was January of last year, I believe it was. Out of nowhere, the Fifth Circuit overturns the ruling. And I had no idea the Fifth Circuit was even looking at it, because I'd already at that point moved here to Tennessee and sort of decided that I'm just going to live my life, and that chapter of my life, slide fire, had come to an end because all of the other circuits had ruled against it. And the funny thing about it is, I still had my tooling, and the Supreme Court the year prior had declined to hear the case because it had been appealed to the Supreme Court prior to that. But the Supreme Court typically doesn't hear cases unless the Fifth Circuit or the Sixth Circuit or the Ninth, unless there's competing rulings. And so when the Fifth Circuit did that, I was like, oh my goodness.
Now there's contrary.
Right, there's competing rulings,
Yeah.
and now it's legal in Texas, Louisiana, and Mississippi, and then the Sixth Circuit, which is Michigan, Ohio, Tennessee, and Kentucky, followed suit. I was like, okay, well, the Supreme Court's going to probably hear it. And then shortly after that, President Biden actually asked the Supreme Court to hear it, which I thought that was a mistake, because I knew if we made it to the Supreme Court would fix the problem. And, that we actually saw that.
Yeah.
We got the ruling this last week, and that's what I've been waiting on for the last year.
So now that that's happened, when you're faced with this decision of full steam ahead or not, what are some of the things you have to consider?
Well, I mean, ultimately it comes down to the sacrifices you have to make. I mean, I want to spend the time that I have left on this earth with my family that I love. Everything comes at a price.
Yeah.
I've sacrificed enough. I've given enough. Like, I just want to sit here on the ranch and take care of my horses, take care of my cows, pick up my eggs in the morning from the chickens. Like, I just want to be quiet and left alone. So, I mean, but at the same time, when the universe calls you,
Yeah, I know. And yeah.
you have to step up to the plate. And, that was one of those things that really struck home, as like, what do I do? And I think I owe it to my grandparents. I think I owe it to my grandparents to make sure that it doesn't just die on the vine. I'm hoping that someone will step up and take the sword, take the cross, take the reins. I think this invention, these products, these patents, the things that we built together has a great future, and I believe the American people want it. I know it's controversial, but you don't have to buy it. Like, that's the thing, is if you don't like it, don't buy it.
Right.
It's for fun. And I think to just walk away is not being a good steward of the gifts you're given. Just because you don't want to do something doesn't mean you don't get to not do it. Sometimes there's things that just have to be done.
Right.
And I feel like this is one of those things. I have a duty and a responsibility to make sure that all of these things we did for the last decade and a half aren't forgotten and lives on. Whoever decides to pick up the reins, they're going to have to be a strong individual. They're going to have to be creative, because problems happen and you have to have solutions, or at least create them.
You know, I look at you now and, you know, I've only ever met you like this, you know. This is the Jeremiah that I know, that
Yeah.
I've gotten to know a little bit better over the last little bit of time. So when I look back at the man who built all of this, it's unrecognizable to me. I mean, it really reminds me of when you look at a picture of a president before his term and after his term, or a young man who went to war and returns from war. And it's just like, you know, it's just so stark. It's like you can just see it in their face and their everything, that it's in no way, shape, or form the same person. And I see that in you. I see that this whole process has changed your outlook in a lot of ways. It's changed some of the ways you operate and your perspective on things. And I see a lot of things that ring true consistently from start to finish about your mindset of how do you do life? How do you deal with people? That has remained consistent.
It centers back on the things of, like, I truly believe we're supposed to grow. Like, you shouldn't be the same person you were 10 years ago. You shouldn't be the same person you were yesterday. You should be striving to be just a little bit better, if not a lot better. Like, those are the things we should do. And once you start stringing those things together and you look back, I think things are supposed to be unrecognizable. I mean, I think you have to grow into these things, and I think you see that through the eyes to the soul. Like, you look in people's eyes and you can see a lot of things. Like, you can see the suffering and the growth and the opportunity and the compassion. And I think that's real. I really do. And I think that's through the opportunities and the experiences that we have through our lifetime. And I think if we remain the same, like, you've wasted your life. And you only get one. So, but yes, physically wise, yeah, I've changed a lot. Like, well, I mean,
I think for the better, you look pretty good.
yeah, I'm at least about 100 pounds lighter than I used to be. You know, going through those injuries tore me down pretty hard. Like, I was in decent shape when I was in the military, but it was 2 brain surgeries and then 9 years of opioids. Like, it destroys your body.
Yeah.
And I've spent the last 10 years repairing it as much as I can. And so, like, yeah, it changes you physically as well. And then, you know, prior to just recently, there was no pictures on the internet of me with a beard. Well, that's changed.
Yeah.
So, I'm just trying to be a good steward. That was put on my heart that, hey, you know, the story still has something to be told, but you need to step away. And I'm just trying to follow that pull in my heart. It's like, hey, you don't have anything else left to prove.
Yeah.
Like, you did what you said you were going to do. Now go do what you told yourself your granddad needed you to do. And so, I mean, my step is to responsibly hand this off, like, to do whatever, you know, to however long it takes, is to pass the torch so that I can go do those things. And so that I can bring this story in my life to at least a close for my involvement. I hope it lives on. I hope somebody picks it up and they continue to develop on the technologies that I have. Like, there's 8 years of product development. I don't want to do that. Like, I want to go fishing. So, like, if somebody wants to pick it up, that's what I'm hoping. I'm hoping someone else is out there that has that passion and that desire to make some changes, do some cool things, and I can dump these ideas that I've got products that never made it to market that are just really cool. And I just didn't have time.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping the universe brings that person into my life and it's like, hey, tell me what you were thinking.
Yeah.
And I can go, here, chase your dreams.
Yeah.
And because I know it's possible.
It is.
So.
Well, I look forward to watching it.
Oh yeah, thank you for taking the time to ask the questions. And like I said, I've been very blessed and fortunate to have lived an interesting life, and I think there's a lot of hope for people there.
Yeah.
Like, I literally
Yeah.
took my family out of poverty.
Yeah.
Isn't that everyone's dream?
Yeah. Yeah.
How can you hate on that?
That's what it's about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think this story is a story of hope.
Yeah. Jeremiah, thank you so much. Can't thank you enough.
Absolutely.
I appreciate it.
Always welcome here.